So, welcome to LightSource HQ.
Thank you. I am so thrilled to be here. This is so awesome to be in Pacific Heights, or Pac Heights as you call it.
Yeah.
It's very, very cool.
Yeah, thank you so much. We love it out here. And if for those who don't know, San Francisco is having what's called a glow up right now. So we have new politics. We have an AI boom. So if there's one time to move to San Francisco, I think it's now.
Yes, and I'm old, so I remember the dot-com boom in the late 90s.
Yeah.
And just watching that was fascinating. And I left the performing arts to come over to tech in that moment. And then we had, so after the dot-com collapse, that we had the real estate boom. We had the second dot-com boom, which has kind of been over the last 10 or 15 years. And then now we're in the AI boom. It's so awesome.
That's really interesting. So wait, I didn't know that. So I didn't know this about you. And I think that, to be honest, part of my excitement about like finding some time to talk is that you spend so much time talking about the world of procurement and interviewing other people that it's sort of like, you know, I want to do the creator's creator thing, you know, like kind of spend some time with you and understand, okay, who is Elouise and how did she come to this place? So, and we've got time, so there's not super free form, but tell me, performing arts.
Well, so I worked for San Francisco Opera.
Really?
Yes. So I was making a career change from, I was a production manager for dance companies, and I saw in the late 90s and 97 specifically that the internet was becoming a thing, or the commercial internet. And I was living here, and back in the day, you'd like read newspapers, and everything was really like, you could see this trend. And I probably wouldn't be in tech if I didn't live in the Bay Area.
Oh,
I think we were so immersed in it, because if I was living in Ohio or Illinois or Texas, which is to take nothing from it, we were so immersed,
exposed to it.
Yeah, all the time. And I'd read the paper, and oftentimes I'd get the paper on the way home, and on BART, I'd read it, and you just couldn't get away from it.
It was obvious at the time.
It was so obvious.
That the internet specifically, like the dot-com.
So I remember in 95, 96, the dance company I was working for, they started to, they had a website, and it became clear that like this was how information was going to be put out there.
Yeah.
And then we were talking in 95, 96, how to get the videos out online. And getting them off analog tape, digitized, was a big deal. Like, you had to go to the studio and all this other stuff. So getting it on the internet, to say nothing of streaming or downloading, like that was like, it would have, like, we couldn't conceptualize how to do it, but we were talking about it. Because as a dance company, like, we had thousands of hours of footage, which of course people wanted to, and you could make that leap pretty quickly, seeing the power of it. And
interesting.
And so then I decided, what I was doing is I was working my job as a production manager, and then I come home and get on the internet. AOL or CompuServe, and it was all dial up.
Yeah.
I mean, you were probably a babe at that.
Yeah, I was, but I remember the sounds of that AOL. I mean, for me, that was like a core memory.
Yeah, totally.
Getting online.
And then I realized that I was ignoring my wife, and so I decided to leave the arts and go straight, just spend my days doing internet
instead of it being a side hobby.
Yeah, and then and so my first job, was with. Well, I spent a year. I took kind of a year off and I had some part-time work. But then my first job was with San Francisco Opera, and I was their webmaster. And what they were doing, their big transition was they were moving all of their ticket sales and subscription renewals online.
Okay.
And so they had a website, and they were starting to really embrace the media part of it. And so I was so on ticket sale day. It was individual season ticket day, not season tickets, but anyway, they used to have a line out at the box
Yeah,
office,
yeah.
like down the street, around the corner, and they would actually video it because
It was
well,
just so
it could,
spectacular.
yeah, it was such a moment. It was a moment you would go and you would get in line, and the box office staff was always very harried on that day.
Yeah.
And over time, by the time I left in like a year or two later, there was no line anymore because it was all online.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So I was there, and then I remember we did the Ring, Wagner's Ring,
Okay.
when in '99, I think. And I remember doing a DVD.
Okay.
Like we produced a DVD for subscription subscribers, and
So what was the transition from this sort of production manager role to tech? And there's a few more steps that I have to imagine between like when the PhD happened and all of this and when and then how procurement came into the fold. And so what was the first tech role that you had?
so at the opera, the marketing manager, her name is Diana Sunshine, and I love her. She's awesome.
Okay.
She had gotten her MBA and some of the folks with her MBA that she was in business school with went to actually worked for A.T. Kearney.
Okay.
And in '99, Kearney was owned by EDS, the big systems integrator firm.
A.T. Kearney was owned by a systems integrator.
Yeah.
Really?
EDS was a huge tech titan in the '90s. They had all these government contracts, and it was like a big thing. It was Ross Perot's company.
Oh, okay, sure.
Now they're just a division of HP. So
Yeah.
so like
It's amazing how things can change.
oh my God, yeah. So so Kearney was owned by EDS, and EDS made some bets. So there was a company called Conext.
Conext.
And it was basically aggregated buying. It was a site set up to do aggregated buying for companies. So
Aggregated like cross company, like
yeah, so you
like GPO.
yeah, like
thing.
GPO.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was the first attempt, and so they got all this funding, and they just blew through it, spending it on consultants.
Oh my goodness.
So, because nobody really knew what they were doing. And then out of that, a group decided to create a reverse auction tool because sourcing was really hot then. And some folks realized, oh, the power of the internet, bring together. And free markets had launched a little bit before that, and then Abbreviate started. And so to make a long story long, Diana left the opera to go to Abbreviate, and 6 months later, I followed her, and then my assistant webmaster was Tom Klein. He came with me. Both Tom and I are still at Kearney, which is
really,
yeah,
that's incredible. So what was it like at Abbreviate, and how did it? Yeah, I feel like there was like I hear about like a few different companies. Obviously, Ariba, Free Markets where Peter used to work. Commerce One is another one that I'd heard about.
And C1, yeah.
And it felt like, okay, there's like this entire sort of Gen 1 of internet-based sourcing companies, maybe a very auction-oriented. And then it was like a winter. So like what sort of happened? Like, why didn't that stick around? Why didn't they all become, the next Salesforce,
Well, well, okay, so a few things happened. So everybody in that late '90s, early 2000s, it was all about the stock options. Everybody thought they were going to get rich.
Yeah.
And I came from the arts, so just having like 52 weeks salary was like already like a bonus. Like blew my mind.
Yeah,
because when I signed with Abbreviate, I got like a bonus, and I was like, holy shit, like a bonus.
bonus, yeah.
Like I'm happy for healthcare and health benefits and the salary for 52 weeks. So I had a much different perspective, but but everybody was walking around like holding, not literally, but holding their contracts. Well, I've got 50,000 shares or 160,000 shares, and if the price is this and this.
Oh, so if you were very, very commercially focused,
Very commercially focused on how much it would pay out.
Was this like because they had seen, Mark Cuban IPO or whatever get acquired?
It was late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah, so everybody, like there was just so much money coming in. You had Amazon really starting to come about, be a known entity. You had
was it still books at that time?
Yeah, it was predominantly books, and they were expanding into things like CDs, and Bezos did drugstore.com, and so like it was a lot of experimenting, and nobody really knew the answer to anything. So why not us? Like, we're a startup. Why wouldn't we? Like, there was no reason we wouldn't expect to go public and make $1 gazillion.
Yeah,
I wasn't motivated by that. The thing about Abbreviate that was really interesting is that there was a third of the group was Kearney people that decided to do the startup thing.
Okay.
So a third were a Kearney startup. Then there was an account. I can't remember what the name of the account was, but EDS had a tech group that was on this big account. It may have been for like AT&T or something like that. And they lost the account. So they had a bunch of people and office space that was
available.
Was available. So like a third of the company became this group of EDS EDS folks, and then a third were outsiders. So like Tom and myself and Diana. So we got this space for free, or like the startup did, because but it was out in Walnut Creek. Okay. And yeah, so in 2000, a lot of excitement, a lot of push. We developed the tool. It was a reverse auction tool predominantly. And it was so complicated and the technology was so bad. It would, like during auctions, it would blow up and all the time. And so I was the webmaster there, or I managed the website. I was in the marketing group, and I watched the CTO and all these doofuses screw up the tech part, and I was kind of not close, but sort of friends with the systems admins, and I was just watching these guys just completely struggle, and I'm like, well, I could do that. Like I could. And so over the course of 6 months, because the CTO was living in London and commuting back and forth.
Right. That's always a bad sign.
Yeah. He was half in, half out. And I remember he got pulled into EDS to do a big RFP proposal that EDS won. So like he was only half in, and then the administrators, they didn't want to step up. So I saw the opportunity, and I inserted myself into the chaos, because there was nothing, it couldn't have been worse, because when you have these major blow-ups, and you'd have to reboot the servers in the middle of an auction. I mean,
oh my goodness! And then what would happen? They'd be like, stand by for like 10 minutes while we fix this. It is interesting, because I feel like there's so much infrastructure now to do all this stuff. I mean, it used to be that if you wanted to serve a website, you had to have a server to serve it, and now it's like, you can just, like, one person can put an app up on AWS and it can scale without any effort. It's such a different time,
Yeah, I mean, we could spend an hour and have an app on AWS in no time at all. And if you saw my end of coolest things of 2024, the guy Matt Sligo, he's just one guy, and he's building AI things off Google's Gemini. And he's just doing it. And that's how far we come. But back in the day, we had a server room on premise in Walnut Creek, and we would unbox servers and put them in the rack and cable them. And my friend Joel, he came from the EDS group. He still works with Kearney. He is very precise in his cabling, and I've always, like, you knew when Joel had done a rack, because it looked like a perfect ponytail. Perfect. And Like me, I didn't really do a lot of it. I just helped them out. I would just hold things or, but if I were just like, I had that back in the day, I had a router at home and like
Yeah.
I was just like cables going every which way. So.
Sure, sure, sure. It's a beautiful mind situation. Yeah, that's really great. And so, okay, so what's the end of the story with this company?
So at the end of 2001, as we went into 2000, so at the end of so it really took off. It got started in late 99. First auctions were run in 99. 2000 was a big ramp up. You have the dot-com collapse in 2000, in November of 2000.
Okay.
And so going into 2001, there was just the market was sagging. Tech companies were going bust left and
Yeah.
right. So they decided that they would try to sell the company. And so we tried to sell to Commerce One. We tried to sell to Manugistics. I2 was another one. And it's funny, I run into people all the time. I used to work at Manugistics or I2 or C1. And yeah, it's funny. And nobody bought, like nobody, we couldn't sell. So Kearney then, so basically at the end of 2002, EDS said, we're done. We're pulling the plug.
Yeah.
And then Kearney said, well, we'll take this and put it into the Kearney business. And then what they did is they sold or siphoned off the technology to Unigraphics, which was owned by EDS too. So they sort of split the company, and Unigraphics became UGS, and then they spun out, and then they got acquired by Siemens. And so like a group went on that journey, and then the rest of us stayed with Kearney and went on a different journey.
And if you've been at Kearney consistently since then, oh my goodness.
So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So whatever our start date with Abbreviate actually counts as
towards Kearney tenure.
Yeah, because we became absorbed into Kearney. So
wow.
So technically, I've been at Kearney coming up on 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. And I mean, look, of all the places you could be, I mean, Kearney is really an amazing organization. So kudos,
Yeah, and it's been bumpy, and as you would expect, but yeah, it's been a wild time. And like, I would never come into Kearney any other way because they wouldn't have me.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't meet the profile, and I'm not critiquing them, or like they have a profile, they hire the profile, and then somebody like me sneaks in the back door, and
it's great. But like, what an incredible, like it's like one of these things where like, you get these amazing happy accidents, and so what a gift for them that they have you on the team. I'm kind of curious, how so now like diving into Kearney a little bit, how within Kearney did you end up becoming Elouise Epstein? And I know that's actually just your name, but how did it end up being that you are in an organization? Because in many ways, I feel like so much of your time is not necessarily just spent doing the classic consulting work, but it's like being a thought leader and creating content and sort of challenging people's thinking. And when I met with, must have been, I think it was Siketu, he was saying, oh, she has like editorial license. Like you have, and I never heard of anything like that in a consulting firm ever. I mean, I've heard you have the editorial license to repeat our exact value statement as is written, but I've never heard about someone having so much sort of freedom. So how did that sort of come about?
I can answer. I just don't care.
Okay.
That's how you get that editorial license.
Yeah.
I mean, like nobody's going to tell me what to do. Like, I mean, so,
that's renegade energy right there.
Totally.
Yeah.
But also when you have been doing it long enough. So as a sort of a sidebar, but if you think about South Park can get away with anything because they've been doing it so long.
Right.
And then you just kind of, we become acculturated to, well, that's just South Park. Whatever they do, however much they push the boundary.
Yeah.
We just go, oh, well, it's just South Park.
Interesting.
We could say that about the soon-to-be president as well. Right. Where we just become acculturated to just whatever it is, like that's... So I think at a certain point, everybody's desensitized. Oh, well, that's just Elouise. Elouise is doing this. So I think there is a little bit of that because, and I guess the other trick is I don't ask for permission. And if I ask for permission, it's like,
Well, that might be the setup that works best for everyone, because then there's plausible deniability. Like,
right.
Hey, we didn't know that talk was going to happen. We didn't know that book was coming out, or I wasn't on my desk,
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's true because I don't think it's any secret that I am not a big fan of SAP or big ERP in general.
Sure.
And so I just wrote a book taking down big ERP. At the same time, Kearney just signed a partnership.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
It's just like, I mean, just like, what do? You shake your head.
Yeah. But it's one of these things, though, at some level, there's this old saying that I think is Warren Buffett, which is that in the short term, the stock market is a voting machine, and in the long term, it's a weighing machine.
Yeah.
And so at some level, I think that the credibility of any consulting firm, like in the long term, is really driven by like the honesty of the people and like the drive for real results and the kind of way that they support the clients. And so, if it turns out that if it turns out that, hey, like actually a lot of digital transformations fail and maybe SAP does come with it a lot of baggage and risks and other issues, it could help the firm's credibility long term that there's someone who's calling it out or thinking more innovatively. Or it could just be like, hey, different strokes for different folks. Like maybe the CPOs that are like, hey, I want I want to buy IBM,
Yeah.
They go to somebody, and then when they're like, hey, I want to see what's new in the space, they go to you. And
that's how it plays out. That's exactly how it plays out.
Yeah.
But it's the other thing is, and I wrote about this in my book, is that you get into consulting groupthink, and you're seeing right now with AI and agents. Everybody's saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And 5 years ago, it was AI and machine learning. And 5 years before that, it was blockchain. And and if you read the stuff, everybody and during COVID, it was resiliency. And I actually did, I don't know if you remember this, but I took like a handful of white papers from all the consulting firms. And when I read them, they all saying the same thing.
They all say the same thing.
So I mixed them up and put some quotes in the book, and I came up with 5-point plan, like random 5-point plans from all these different things, because they all said the same thing. And so I'm not afraid to call out the profession too.
Yes.
So, because we get into the echo chamber of best practices this. You are failing at that, and it's very pejorative, which also drives me nuts. Because we sit in an ivory tower echo chamber bubble, and then we pontificate down to as some critical judge. And when you get out there, the world is messy.
It is messy,
and it's like, well, it's easy to say that, and so I didn't even answer your question, but I take a much more conciliatory tone. I make fun of people that stand in the ivory tower, and I try to inspire. That's my goal, is to inspire, but if not just encourage folks, cheerlead for folks, because the day-to-day sucks. And so when you do that and you take that tone, then your message gets through, because people, and if I make fun of SAP or Kearney or whomever, then people are like, hey, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy, because I know more than those stupid consultants that, because, sorry, I'll let you talk in a second.
No, this is
the thing that just drives me crazy is that you have people at these companies with 5, 10, 15, 20 years experience.
Yeah.
And then you bring in consultants, and you get the partners in that do the song and dance, and then the project starts, and you basically get people out of MBA school.
Right.
Who know nothing about procurement.
Or younger.
Or younger. And I mean, there's a cognitive dissonance to the people that are working at these companies. And they're supposed to bow down to the whatever. This is more of consulting wide, not client. we have a playbook and the playbook, and we are all knowing, all, and we're arrogant and we're well put together, and you're wearing a hoodie, and so you can't know as much as I do because I've got, I'm all put together. And it's like that dynamic, and I see it all the time, is just so the arrogance just irritates the shit out of me.
Interesting. I think that makes a lot of sense. And it makes also sense that you coming from the alternative route, right?
Right.
I mean, it's so true. And maybe that's why I sometimes feel that, it's sort of like when someone gets a transplant, an organ transplant, their body sometimes rejects it.
Yep.
And so I almost feel that in these consulting engagements, like you have to take a lot of antihistamines to prevent the body from rejecting the outside help. And it does feel that way. It is really interesting. And then the challenge is like, okay, like a lot of times, like we work with a lot of, it's sort of funny when I know someone was a consultant when they call customers clients.
Yes. Yes.
That's just natural. But we work with a lot of customers where, they'll have done a consulting project, they'll do this big cost takeout activity, and then fast forward 6 months, the cost is put back in. So,
Yeah, exactly.
the question is, okay, how can you go from, I don't know if this is an okay analogy, but how do you go from, one-time liposuction with no habit change to, diet and exercise? But then I think, okay, technology is kind of Ozempic, right? You can have a little bit of the best of both worlds. You can do like, okay, how can we make it easy to do the right things and get great outcomes? And it shouldn't be by force. It should be by, hey, we're empowering you, enabling you with new technology, that kind of stuff. So,
yeah. And I mean, and I think what gets lost in this is that you have to have leadership and enablement and coaching and development, and what passes for all of those is pretty weak.
Interesting.
And I think that's a big miss on the consulting firm, because we come in, the consulting industry, we come in and just like completely lose our credibility because we're too arrogant. And I'm not, again, this is not Kearney. I watch this because oftentimes clients will confide in me, and they'll just complain about the other consulting firms, or we'll be on projects that are so big that there's multiple firms. I just sit back and I just observe, and the arrogance drips off these folks.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting. People are starved for authenticity in the business world,
Yeah.
like people, they're a certain person from 9 to 5, and then it's like everyone is going and watching Bridgerton at home and like be like, ooh, this is naughty, like it's like, I think it sort of relates to the South Park point too, because right, like what people love about Matt Stone and Trey Parker is that they're exactly what they say they are.
Yeah.
And why is, not to, bring politics up, but why is that Trump gets away with what he does? But if you remember Eliot Spitzer, the governor of New York, the reason people went so crazy about it was not because he had hired a prostitute, but it was because he had prosecuted prostitution rings and hired a prostitute, And so
it's the hypocrisy.
It's the hypocrisy.
And people want the authenticity. I 100% agree. People want the authenticity, and that'll win every day. And telling me that this is a best-in-class playbook is bullshit. We know it's not. And because you have brought your best-in-class playbook, and in 6 months when you're gone, some other jackass is going to bring in their best-in-class playbook, and we gaslight these people, and it's just.
It's true. I mean, here's a question though. Like you brought up another point that I want to circle back on, which is this sort of, this idea of the leadership of the CPO, or maybe the vacuum of leadership at the CPO level. Talk me through like, the different kinds of CPOs that you see. I see a lot of them, and I definitely feel like there's some where they have a vision and they're, advocating that vision down. I see some where it feels like they're just along for the ride, and what the team wants to do, they'll get on board with. And I'm just sort of curious, like, tell me about the archetype. Like if somebody who's not in procurement asks, who is the CPO? Like, how would you describe that persona?
What I would say, it's great. I would say
It's an impossible to describe group of people. It's like almost like maybe one time you made like a deal with like a ghost or something, and you can't say the word.
oh yeah, I see that exactly.
The CPO. No,
Yeah, no. The CPO role absolutely has changed, and I think
okay.
that's really we are watching a generational shift, and that's where I think you really see the dichotomy and what you're describing is a spectrum of different leadership capabilities. So you always are going to have that 10% at the top, the Len DeCandias of the world, Cyril at BT, Ninian at Vodafone, on and on and on. Like there are those elite ones, and then there are the sort of I'll talk a good game, I'll do some things, but maybe I have some insecurity, or I don't have it all buttoned up, but I'm not going to admit it. Then you have the folks that are just way in over their head, that just like, and there are a number of them, and they don't say a lot, or when if they take a position, it's one of just absolute best practice, quote unquote, because I can point to McKinsey's study or Kearney's study and have air cover from that because I don't have whatever.
Yeah.
And when I say there's a generational change, what I mean is most of the CPOs in the previous generation, it was bifurcated between, you had this elite group and then you had everybody else. And now you start to see a greater spectrum of growth. And you see younger folks like Cyril who come in and they're like, I'm not going to make the same mistakes that I watched the previous generation. So that's why this generational change is important, because Jaime Robles at American Airlines, when he was at Casey's, he did the same thing. He's like, I'm not making these same mistakes. I am not taking the tech vendors at their word. I'm not hiring consultants. One of the things which strikes me is, for the most part, these companies, these younger CPOs, are not hiring consultants.
Interesting.
Or they might hire them for a one-off kind of thing, which is actually makes sense. Whereas in the previous generation, those CPOs would do these big projects because they either didn't have the expertise themselves, or they didn't want to build the team up. And what I love about Cyril's, he built the whole team up. Jaime has done the same thing. And you watch them. That's what really separates, is the teams that they build. And I'll just say, even at the level of Len was of the previous generation, one of the stellar ones.
Yeah,
in the previous generation, the CPOs he brought in that were reported to him.
Okay.
I mean, Shashi, Heidi Landry, Julian, you go down the list. These are legitimate CPOs in their own right. That, like, Heidi was the CPO at Dow Chemical, and
she's at J&J now.
Yeah, he was at P&G before, and so he comes to J&J. I mean, like, Len is attracting these super amazing folks, and like that was a once in a sort of generational thing to do. And now, as Len is retired, and like the other CPOs and J&J has changed,
they've spread their wings.
Right. I mean, like you watch over the next 5 years, those, like, some of the most amazing folks will come out of that. It's sort of like in football, where you have for many years it was Bill Walsh here in San Francisco, and you had all the folks the coaches underneath them.
Bill ended up becoming head coach.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a PayPal mafia, isn't there?
Yeah, the PayPal mafia, isn't there?
There are a lot of things about. By the way, I totally buy this idea that there are like certain places and points in time where exceptional people it's like a critical mass, they like suck together.
Yeah.
And then when that supernova explodes and they're cast across the entire industry, they're all doing amazing things. Another example of this, by the way, and I'm really biased, is I think Tesla circa 2015.
Yeah.
When they were making the transition. It's sort of funny. The irony is Tesla, the average tenure is like 18 months. So people churn out pretty quick. but the benefit is that those people are now like all over these other
Of
companies,
course.
and they're all, they all have risen to these incredible heights,
And actually, if you really want to go back on and I think about this often, the OG of doing this is Larry Ellison.
Oh, interesting.
And really, like Mark Benioff comes out of there and goes on to Salesforce. I forget all the others who come out, but
Yeah.
like, and you're right. And then shortly thereafter, like Ellison did it sort of 90s into the 2000s. And then, of course, the PayPal mafia absolutely takes it to a whole new level.
It's interesting. I mean, it's really interesting. I feel like, I have a younger brother, and he always calls me and texts me asking for career advice. And he's at Amazon. There's a million teams there. And like, which team should I be? Should I be in New York? Should I be in Seattle? That kind of thing. And I always tell him the same thing, which is like, go where the best people are.
Yeah.
So if you go with the best people are, it's just it will just raise all ships. You know what I mean? And so that really makes a difference. But now here's the question, which is, if you're a CPO, Phil Eidson, from the procurement, he always asks people like, did you find procurement, or did procurement find you? That's his classic question. I love it. But 9 times out of 10, it's procurement found me. And
more than that, it's like 99
out of 100, 99 out of 99, maybe.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It's sort of like that. So I guess the question is, like, if you're a CPO, how do you attract the top talent? Like, how do you attract people to be around you where, like technical, smart, hardworking people who often want to have career upside, So how do you sell to them the idea that procurement is a durable place to be, and that there is innovation there? It's not just, punching out POs for people,
Well, I swear to God, if we're punching out POs in 10 years, we collectively, you as a founder, me as an influencer, will have failed.
Yeah.
Like we got to get beyond that.
Sure.
We as a collective profession will have failed, and like it will have passed us by. I'll answer your question in 2 ways, because I go back to what when I interviewed Ninian, at the CPO at Vodafone. What he wants is people like you just described that want to go out and innovate, and he expects them to leave after 18 months, 2 years, and go to Google, go to Facebook or Meta, wherever, go to Amazon. To him, that's a win. And that's a mindset that we don't have in procurement. And so my comment on this is, if I walk into P&G or J&J or General Motors, and I work in procurement, what am I going to get access to first and foremost? The spend data.
Yeah.
Tell me that looking at where J&J spends their money, or P&G spends their money, any enterprise, where they spend their money, that's got to be the most fascinating thing.
Fascinating, yeah.
And if you have designs on being a CEO one day, why would you not want to start by understanding where the company writes checks to? Like who they write checks to, who they pay, why? Because you're going to learn the business so much better that way.
Interesting.
Than being a cog in a machine that you may, in engineering, you're the coffee schlepper. Yeah. Like I can learn more and then grow into, and then move over into the business.
It's interesting. I've heard a variant of this before, which is that the best CEOs are the ones who are closest to the P&L. Yeah. And that they really understand the financial management of the business. But I'd thought about that as like a finance analyst path. I've never thought about that as a procurement spend analytics, spend visibility path. It is really interesting. Or maybe one day they say, you know what, we're spending, $100 million on this kind of service. I should go and start a company in that industry. And maybe maybe it's another reference point.
But I mean, look what we see this in, let's call it Silicon Valley writ large.
Yeah.
Whereas everything's great. We're selling, we're innovating, yeah, and then something happens, and all of a sudden it's sheer panic, and now we have to cut costs. And then you it's almost cliche at this point. You see this major, like, oh, we got to cut our marketing budget by a gazillion dollars. And
well, here's this brings up like I feel like a sort of I want to call it almost like an elephant in the room type topic, which is around savings. Um, you're already laughing because
I know exactly what you're going to ask me.
And so it's one of these things where, and we talk about this all the time in the company. There's a whole there's a whole slew of things that we have to think about. So the first thing is that there is not an incentive for savings, right? So salespeople go out, they sell a $10 million contract. Not only are they getting so many high fives that day that their hand is sore, but they're getting a commission, 10% bonus. Now, if you go to procurement and you say, hey, you can go and save $100 million, not only do you not get a commission, but people might look at it and actually, it might be an indictment of your previous work, right? Why was there opportunity to save? And so there isn't really an incentive around creating savings. It doesn't really land with folks. Like, people don't really want to, I feel like it's sort of weird. I feel like at some level, they really want to talk about savings and savings generation because it is at some level core to the role of procurement. Like, we want to be able to get the best value for the right product for the business. But at some level, people never want to talk about it. And if there's any question about hey, are we paying fair prices? Those things can get very uncomfortable for people to talk about. And we want to very quickly look at anything but. So I'm telling you, savings does not sell software. I know that firsthand. So tell me about the idea of, I'm just throwing a few things at you, but how do you think about savings? How do CPOs talk about savings? Is it real? I mean, there's a lot in here. And maybe a good place to start is, what do you think the question that I was going to ask was going to be?
Well, no, that's yeah, you just explained the whole thing, but typically the question is why didn't nobody care about savings, or why does nobody believe savings?
Okay. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. But a lot of people talk about that. So let's now go one level deeper,
All of us are procurement people in our personal lives. Let's just go back to that.
Yeah.
I take out a loan. I have $50,000 to remodel my house, just arbitrary. Not here in the Bay Area. That doesn't.
Yeah.
That'll get you
And by the way, you're just want to level set that you're in the category of people that have a home, and I'm not.
Yeah.
So already the idea of taking out a $50,000 loan to fix the house is,
well, okay. That's
I'm just joking. It just not in the Bay Area,
Yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah.
Although when you exit, then you'll be able to buy up in Pack Heights here.
I think you mean exit the city.
So all of us are procurement people in our own world. So if you're going to buy a new car, are you going to buy used, or are you going to buy new? Because the first question you're going to ask is, well, as soon as a car is a depreciating asset, so I drive it off the lot, it's just taking $2,000 off the value.
Yeah.
Maybe you're okay with that because a new car is not going to have maintenance issues, and you're balancing your time against, and you walk in and the dealer's going to offer you 15% APR, like interest rate, and you're like, I'll come in with my own loan.
Yeah.
So really, when it gets to buying a car, there's three sort of levers. There's, do you have a trade-in? Because do you need financing, and do you need and the amount of down payment?
Yep.
And so, of course, the sales folks in the car dealer know that. So you're going to trade in a car, I'm going to undercut you on that, but give you a great interest rate, or vice versa. Or I'll give you a ton of money for your used car, but I'm going to charge you a higher interest rate. So, but if I walk in with a pile of cash and say, I want that car for $2,000, like the sticker says $20,000, I'm going to give you $16,000 in cash right now. That salesperson might entertain that, or we might get to 17. Is that not just procurement, like straight up?
Yeah.
And the reason I would offer that money up front, or try not to get into a long-term loan with high interest rates, is because I only have so much money coming in each month. And so if I don't spend that extra money on the car, or if I get a $50,000 loan to remodel my house. If I pick a slightly different, the carpet's cheaper than the linoleum, well, that's a $5,000 savings. So now I have $5,000 more to do new faucets or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm making these trade-offs. We do this every day in everything. If I leave here, I'm going to go get a coffee. And so, but if I, or an espresso, and because
Sure.
I love the coffee shop, as you know, Compton's around the corner that I love.
Yeah.
That's $5, $6, $7. Like that $7. If I save that, then like that, and that's a trade-off. And I'm making a financial trade-off because my monthly salary doesn't change. I get my salary or biweekly, and so if I'm going to, like, that amount of money is not going to change. So I either spend less or I get a second job and make more, which is not going to happen given where I'm at. So how is that why is it that when we walk into P&G, all of a sudden, like, I'm going to negotiate the savings? Well, the reason this doesn't work is that when I save money on the car or the floor or whatever, that money is going to benefit me. I'm not necessarily going to save it and put it in the bank. I'm saving the money, or I'm avoiding the cost by going and getting the latte. But I'm still spending that money somewhere. And that's the difference. And I can wrap my head around that because we all, to some degree, whether deliberately or not, manage our finances.
Of course, yeah.
And so when we go to the big organization, that buying decision gets abstracted. Right. The engineers kind of just pass it off to procurement, and procurement's like, well, it's not my money. Yeah. And I'm just doing the best I can. And if I save that $100 million, it probably, as you rightly said, comes back of, well, were you really doing your job?
Yeah.
And if I save that, like, that money is probably just going to get spent elsewhere.
Right.
So I'm not really much like we do in our personal lives. And so then, so how am I measured? Like, so why did I do that?
So what's the fix, though? Because I think you've identified a very clear issue, right? Which is that people don't treat the corporate spend like they do their own money. And it's not even like it's a little bit different. It's like, it's way different. Two sides of the entire universe. So, and the reason that salespeople treat the sale as if it's their own money is because it becomes their own money.
Exactly.
I think there is maybe like two sort of good counterexamples that I've seen. One is in the automotive space. In some of the big three autos, they have a very involved cost engineering team,
right? Where
they'll do a very detailed should cost. They know all the rates, they know all the materials, and so they can actually measure procurement on like the theoretical to actual purchase price variance, or the gap. And so, you'll never get to the real theoretical price because for whatever reasons, but there's with a lot of work, you can kind of measure how folks are doing. The other example that I think we see a lot is the consulting world. And the reason is because you have in tech, to use a tech term, an A/B test, a before and an after. So attribution is very clear. Before Kearney came in or before McKinsey came in, this was the state of play. Yeah. And then when we left, this was the new cost basis for us. And that delta is directly attributable to us.
Right.
If I thought it through the idea of savings commissions, right? What could you give someone a percentage of savings? But the problem is it creates this perverse incentive, like, oh, we should start really high and then work our way down. So the repeat game fails, but the one and done kind of works. And that's how you get firms that will work on contingency, right?
Exactly.
And or they'll do an fee at risk engagement, but the numbers are enormous, right? So here's the question: like, how do we get procurement to start to view the money that we're spending as it were our own? Because if we don't do that, then in 5 years, AI is going to outperform us. Right.
Well, I think it will. I don't think we can solve this problem.
Okay.
Because unless, and I'll give you the example that typically works, unless there's a direct impact to the bottom line, so that we actually that money and we can trace it into the savings bucket, shall we say, to use sort of personal finance as an example. It's not just sort of take the 5,000 and put it somewhere else. If I take it and put it into and I check the box, and now I have $5,000 in stock making profit, we're not going to solve it. Now, the one example is zero-based budgeting, and so
So tell for the audience,
for the audience,
what's zero-based budgeting?
yeah, I'm not an expert in this, so but essentially you start with a blank sheet every year. Actually,
Yeah.
maybe Peter could probably explain this better than I can. But essentially that you don't have a budget. Like, it's not the typical.
You roll over last year's budget. You start with blank slate and have to explain
Exactly.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Versus every year we have $10 million and plus interest, like it's 10 million becomes 10 million and 10.5 million just automatically. So, and you go through this whole budgeting process, and whatever your budget is that year, if you have to go over, you can't go over, you have to like reduce costs. And so that makes organizations that are very attentive to the bottom line, because every dollar gets tracked into the bottom line. And there's arguments for that and against that. But in that case, procurement becomes very, very important to making that because if you're only if you want 10 and you get $9 million, well, if you could make up that gap by throwing procurement at it. So
it's interesting. So let's say that I think about the CPO, right? They might be measured on P&L. They have bonus structures and stuff like that. If we get down to the category manager level, right? The people who are doing the work, they're calling the suppliers, they're negotiating. If I have a supplier I like, that they've been delivering, the only problem is that they probably are 25% too expensive, but I'd have to stay at the office an extra hour every day in order to validate a new supplier and all that stuff. Why would I do that? And in what circumstances could we construct in which I would want to do that?
You probably wouldn't. Like, my argument is you probably won't.
Okay.
Like the incentive's not there.
So
eventually over time, you either get the consultants that come in, take out that 25% or take out 20% of it, and you either push that person aside, or, as you sort of alluded to, you get AI to do it. And I think that's where it's going. I don't think that, I think it's unavoidable.
So, okay. So you think in 10 years, category management and sourcing, negotiation, are there people doing that function?
Well, there'll always be people, right? Because there's always a spectrum of companies and a spectrum within each company.
Sure.
But the idea of 1,500 procurement people, the idea of 500 procurement people in an organization, I don't buy it.
Interesting.
And that will scale down. Now, you're always going to have the outliers, the 10% that are inefficient and doing whatever their special flowers. And so I'm not talking about them, but I'm talking about where we are today and the things we ask people to do. A lot of that's, I mean, I'm watching AI agents be developed to do this stuff.
To do a lot of stuff, yeah.
And so over time, I don't think this is where I think I differ from a lot of people. I think that's going to happen, bar none. And why are we doing negotiations with humans? Or most of it should be either supply and demand matching or autonomous negotiations. Like, that should be the case today. We have that technology. But my argument is not that we fire all of procurement. I actually think we shift them to doing other things, like real risk management. Because real risk management is not this risk theater that's the term of the day, I think. Yeah, that's what we do.
It's like greenwashing, but
exactly. Risk, exactly. And in my book, I did a whole thing on the TSA, which is nothing more than security theater. And
sure. Well, I thought the TSA was a way to sell clear passes.
Well,
If the disincentive to not get clear is big enough, it's good business.
yeah, although if you've like the clear lines are pretty long these days, so
In San Francisco, yeah,
for
yeah.
sure. Anyway, but that's the thing is we could actually, or we could do real sustainability, not the pretend fill out a survey like
Yeah,
this whole carbon
scoring,
tracking. Yeah, that's just nonsense. So, so my argument is that, and this gets to that inspirational bit is like you managing that category is not really adding the value because you're right. You're using the supplier because and they're 25% more, but you can make the case that we have to use this supplier because you want to leave at 3:30 or you're supposed to leave at 4 and you leave at 3:45 every day because you want to go coach your kids.
Yeah. Literally. And also there's less risk. It's the devil you know versus the one you don't. Right. So
you probably spend half your time making the argument to keep with that supplier when in reality you're overpaying. And
yeah, it's interesting. It's really
which is not, I'm not being critical of that, but that's not, if we're honest, that's not real. I mean, that's very replaceable by autonomous agents.
Keeping the same supplier certainly is.
Right. I mean, like, what are we doing?
Yeah. I'm going to ask a sort of specific question, which is if you were going to start a company today, like alternative universe, for some reason you're going to leave Kearney and you're going to start.
Well, I will at some point, right? I mean, I'm getting old in consulting here, so.
Well, at least it's the NBA and not the NFL.
Yeah.
So you got years. And I think the nice thing is that if obviously we could talk about this more, but it's an industry where your thought leadership and network can continue to provide value, obviously. But let's say that you were to start a company and you're like, all right, I'm going to go and build something in the procurement tech space. I know all the people. I am seeing trends that my thesis is, I believe, are really important. What would you be building and why?
I would not build a tech product for a few reasons. One, I'm terrible at it. I've given that a shot a few times in my career and I suck. I absolutely suck at it. So,
but what about the San Francisco Opera digitization initiative from circa no, I'm just joking.
Yeah, no. I mean, it was a success, but actually it had its own problems. Although I came in to help fix them.
Yeah.
But, problems were more because the technology was brand new.
Yeah,
sure. Piece of middleware called Silverstream, which that's like old school Java platform in the early days, and some people will laugh at that.
So you wouldn't build a tech platform
just because I'm not. I'm
just the founder market fit thing.
Well, I'd love to be a founder, but I'm also more of an evangelist. But I'm actually just not good at it. I love technology. You have 4 daisy chain computers up there. I love that. And not that I don't want to do it. I wouldn't even know how to do it, but I appreciate it for what it is. Yeah. Like somebody daisy chain like that. So like to me, that just strikes me as I love technology. I love that we have, 2 iPhones set up and these mics. But I don't want to build the product. I don't even want to operate the product. Or, I mean, I might use the product, but I love technology for it. I don't want to create it.
Interesting.
So my thing is I want to me, I feel like I'm a teacher. Like at the core of what I do is teaching and maybe advocating or inspiring, ideally. So I want to, if I were to do a startup, it would be much more in helping people bridge that gap, the capability gap. That's 100%.
So be more in line with what you're doing. So then maybe I'll ask a variant of the question, so that way you have to answer it. But let's say, here's maybe a different question. You're seeing founders all the time, new companies coming up. They probably say, Dr. Epstein, please, talk to us. What do you feel like you wish you see someone building that you've not yet? If something comes to mind.
Well, I think the thing that excites me the most is all these agents and this idea that you can have a platform that is so sophisticated. I mean, and I'm building agents myself, which sounds like so arrogant to say, but I'm able to do research things that I hadn't been able to do before. So I like the power of this of Gen AI, of the AI platforms themselves. And to me, I look at Gen AI as a way to tap into this as a novice, not like it's amazing. I can do things with data that I wouldn't even know how to
Yeah.
before if I had to do using like R or Alteryx
Sure,
or some of
sure,
these other
sure.
tools. I just say in common language, hey, Chat GPT, I need to do this.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
So I think that to me is much more interesting I don't need to build more technology. There's more technology out there than we could ever use. So I want to help people use that technology, and I want to be inspired by what they do.
Interesting. So here's another question, maybe going back in history, was there ever uh was there ever a moment in your 25 years at Kearney where you thought, okay, this is something I would really consider leaving the business for? So yeah, was there ever a time where you were having like a real internal struggle to figure out, okay, like there's an opportunity that's come up that is so good that despite having been at Kearney already for 5 or 10 or 20 years, you were like, I am at the razor's edge of making that decision to completely change my career at this point.
No, because my career was very lumpy,
Yeah.
and I've told this story many times. In 2016, I was going to leave Kearney voluntarily or involuntarily because my platform had run out of gas, and so and that's when I started to look around and see the just complete disaster that was the Procure Tech or the legacy source to pay suites. And that's what kind of got me down this path. And part of it is like I had nothing to lose. Like I could go against the grain and just completely like critique everything and everybody. So my regret is that I was the first one to sort of like put this together. If I would have stopped and done like an investment fund and taken a equity piece in all these early stage, that, or ideally done it for Kearney, that would have been
Yeah.
sort of the best of both worlds. But I was I was lacking confidence. I was too like I was just didn't believe in myself and what I was seeing. So I think that would have been the closest to answer your question. That would have been the
Yeah.
time. But while I saw it and I was advocating for it, I wasn't 100% sure I was right.
Well, why not now? Like, why not do the same thing now?
Well, right. So I'm not sure I could say this on camera, but I am at a similar point because I see this whole power of these agents and
Yeah.
like the fact that I can do wild, crazy stuff.
What's an example of something that even just one that you've done with agents?
Many years. So coming out of grad school, I wanted to, like, I had this idea of studying country music. I love country music. I love a lot of different music. So I love show tunes. So like
This I'm aware of.
yeah. So and I was doing a lot of textual analysis in the early natural language processing days where it was becoming kind of a thing in business.
Yeah.
And not years ago in research academia. But anyway, I thought, wouldn't it be great to take the lyrics of the top country songs from every year and do a textual analysis on them and check the themes, see the themes happen over years. And so I kind of played with this idea, and then I hired somebody to write Python scripts for me that would go to these websites and download all the lyrics. And then I paid somebody else to do textual analysis on some of this stuff that both of these I would be able to run on my own.
Yeah.
But it was just so it was kludgy, and I didn't have the time to like, wait, where's that Python script? How do I run that? What do I do? And it was not. So I built an agent as sort of to basically do that. And it basically does this and does the thematic. And I just built it this week.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What did you use? Like, can you share?
Gemini.
Gemini?
Yeah.
Do they have like a self-serve agent
Yeah.
product now or?
Yeah, I don't know. I was using the studio, so
Okay,
somebody
nice, dude.
somebody taught me. So
Okay, okay.
and just said this is what you do, and so I did it, and then I was like, holy shit! Like it didn't even take me 5 minutes, and the analysis comes back like that, and and I was so then I'm like I call my friend Jeff who's consultant at Kearney, partner at Kearney, and I'm like, you know that thing I was telling you about like 10 years ago, I just did it. And so we got on a screen share, I was like doing the thing, and the agent comes back, and of course post 9/11, 2000 to 2010 is the very much
9/11 America.
9/11 America kind of themes. But then in 2010 to 2014, you get the emergence of bro country and female, and then 2015 to 2020 is female empowerment and country.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, this thing was like we could have gone all night just like
That's
that.
amazing.
Yeah, and I just did this thing in 5 minutes. I mean, so the power of that, like I know nothing, and I love technology, but I don't know anything really, that I have all that power at my fingertips. And by the way, now you know what I came up with this morning or yesterday is I'm going to have the agent go download all the lyrics, and then I'm going to have it figure out how to build a knowledge graph. I don't even know what a knowledge graph is. I just know that it's a way to visualize all this stuff. And like, I mean, that kind of power at my fingertips. Tell me, talk about democratization of AI.
Of AI, yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, it does feel, it does feel to me like AI is not. To be honest, I never really understood the applications of blockchain in whether it's NFTs, or in 2021 when we were getting started, a lot of people asked us how we were using blockchain, and I just kind of didn't even pretend to think that was a good idea. I think the number one killer use case for blockchain is cryptocurrency, which is what it was created for. And so trying to fit a crypto peg into a real world hole is just not the right thing. But with AI, it's amazing to me because it's, Gen AI, like any of these chatbots, they are better than 95% of white collar professionals at whatever you ask them to produce. Then when you add agents, that's like the arms and legs of the robots. You have the brain, and then you have the arms and legs. And so it's just very interesting. But I think the thing that is always unclear to me, and I think for many technologists, if you want to call us that, is what is the timeline are we talking about, right? Like, because I think this is the thing, it's like the 80/20, like it's very easy to get, 80% of the way really quickly and have people be like, look at that trajectory. And it was like that with self-driving cars. Like actually I'll tell a story from Waymo, but early on there was a Waymo, there was like some kind of test that they wanted to run. They wanted to drive from like Palo Alto to like Marin or something. And if they could do that in 2010, everyone got a big bonus because Larry and Sergey's perception was that if the car can do that, it's solved, And so they did it. There were people apparently walking alongside the car, blocking stop signs, so it would continue to keep moving without, needing a person's intervention. It successfully completed it. They all got paid out, and then they all left and went and started their other companies like, Aurora and stuff like that. And then it was like, shoot, it's like 10 more years to kind of get it dialed in. And then now we're starting to see it commercialized really on the streets like this year. And so it's the same thing with agentic stuff, I feel, which is like, all right, like if this is 10 years away, then then LightSource is totally doing the right things. We're building the infrastructure that a lot of people are going to use for it. But if somebody can tell me, like a genie can say, hey, look, in 6 months time, an agent for procurement, a vertical agent, is going to be just as good or better than the person, and organizations will start adopting it like, it'll start hitting like wildfire, then we have to pivot immediately.
Yeah, I don't think that'll happen. Not for your sake. But the term I've been using is every employee a manager.
Oh, every employee a manager. Interesting.
And so I don't care where you are in the organization, you will have 20 agents working for you, doing whatever. I don't care what it is. If you're a salesperson, you could have 20 agents calling on your, or some update in the CRM, some prospecting. And in procurement, that category manager, why would that category manager not have 20 agents working for them? So if you're a CPO with 100 people, you really have 100 people and 2,000 agents working for you. So,
interesting.
Like that, to me, I think we'll see more of that and we'll see it with the younger folks coming in, not the old category managers.
Well, here's the question. In that universe, why does the category manager need to have 20 agents versus the CPO and one, maybe chief agentic designer who goes and says, we're going to have all 20,000 agents directly following our best in class practice?
I think if you built a company from scratch, you would get that. I think, to our point earlier, a company, an existing company that's been around for 100 years is messy, and there's just too much. But it's sort of like what Tesla did to traditional car companies. Instead of having like 400 controllers, there's a couple, and it's all controlled
central
centrally.
Computer, yeah.
Like now, all of a sudden, that opens up all kinds of new avenues, which is not like a traditional car company is going to struggle. So you could take the same model and what you just described, if you start a new e-commerce company or whatever, you could do that. I believe you could do that today. But the problem is it's going to take forever to get a P&G or a whomever.
Interesting. Well, look, I think this is a great note to end on. I have loved our conversation. Thank you so much for coming by LightSource HQ.
Thank you for having me. This is so lovely to be here in the city. So.